Hello and welcome to the programme. Ukraine has started preparations for the Invictus Games 2020, the sports competition for wounded veterans that will be held next May in The Hague in the Netherlands. Now this time the Ukrainian team will consist of 20 athletes, and I'm pleased to say to talk more about this we're joined in the studio today by Oksana Horbach. She is the head of Stratcom Ukraine. Thank you very much, Oksana, for coming in.
Thank you for having me.
So the Invictus Games is a really exciting event for wounded war veterans, and we've certainly covered it on this channel many times.
Yes.
So can you tell us a bit more about the selection process, where the events are going to be held for the selection, and also what are the criteria for this?
Well, we are very excited to finally be able to launch Invictus Games in Ukraine this week. And actually, currently we launched the registration of everyone, of each candidate who wishes to participate in Invictus Games. So they can register on the website, at Invictus Games in UA website. And following that, we will have sport trials in Lviv, Odessa and Kiev. Sport trials is not actually a sport event. This is about a possibility, an opportunity for each veteran to try sports, to go out of home, go to a safe place and see what sports in Invictus Games look like. So we do not judge them, we do not give them any rankings or anything. They just need to come. They have to bring, the clothes and document that they need to provide to so we make sure that they are qualified to participate in Invictus Games. But following that, no judgment. They just can go through whatever number of sport events that they want to participate.
I think that's great, because I would imagine that a lot of the wounded war veterans might feel quite intimidated if it was a competition straight away.
Absolutely. And we are so anxious that a part of the veteran think that Invictus Games is like a Paralympic, high-profile event only for athletes. It is not. So basically, nobody who participates in the Team Ukraine needs any kind of professional sport experience. They just need to, be healthy enough to do sports, because, the sport is pretty, might be physically stressful. However, if they are capable of going out of home and coming to us, please do. And even if you don't have any sport experience, it's fine. So following sport trials, we will contact each of the participants of the sport trials who, want to proceed, who want to move forward and actually participate in the sport competition. The national competition will be held in September, on 8th of September, and this is actually going to be a sport competitive event, so everybody would be competing against each other. So this is actually the process. Following that, the selection committee will be sitting for about a month to make sure that they look through each story and select the most the candidates who represent Ukraine and actually who correspond with the criteria of Invictus Games selection this year. And these selection criteria include the rehabilitation effect, which basically means that we want and it's literally 40% of the weight, in decision-making is to the rehabilitation effect, which means that we want to select people, we want to select girls and boys who actually will benefit most from the Invictus Games physically or psychologically. So the second selection criteria is the attitude. So what we want to see is that this person actually can represent the Invictus Games values, which is about respect, courage, teamwork, empowerment, and that's something that is very important to international community and for us to be able to represent Invictus Games here in Ukraine. The third criteria is actually sport ethics. So this is actually a behavior of each competitor on the game of field of game. So
that's interesting. Okay,
that's right. So we don't want to see the behavior in which each the competitors fight with each other, or make some bullying or anything to intimidate anyone. So this is not Invictus Games. This is not about this. The values that we want to protect. And the last criteria is actually sport result, but it's only 10% of the weight in the decision making. So it's really not about medals. It's not about sport results. It's about rehabilitation effect, about attitude and representation of Invictus Games values and ethics.
Yeah, and I think the rehabilitation thing you mentioned is particularly interesting as well. I mean, is it quite difficult to find veterans to take part in Invictus Games? Because I would imagine perhaps a lot of them feel as if if they should hide away, that they're still recovering. These soldiers are still
Absolutely.
going through rehabilitation.
That's right. It is very hard to reach veterans who are not socially integrated yet, and this is actually the target audience that we want to reach. And I have to say that although Invictus Games through the past years was one of the most attended veteran-wise events in Ukraine, so we had like 600 veterans altogether over the 2 years, which is huge for Ukrainian events, sport events, but it's not nearly enough. So we don't see a lot of severely injured veterans or blind veterans, and they just don't come. They are intimidated by the entire, sport, Paralympic, achievement, medal stuff. So they don't even want to try. That is why it's so important for us this year to make sure that we reach these people. And I think this is the role of Ministry for Veteran Affairs, which been just launched this year, as they have this vast network of veterans around Ukraine. And I truly believe that if we as media, as this public communication, if that cannot reach the veteran, the other veteran can. So if we make sure that we have this network of veterans who actually advocate for Invictus Games and they talk to other veterans, that will make the trick. So we really hope that we'll have more veterans this year with severe injuries and even those who do not ever participated in any kind of sport event.
Yes, and from the veterans who've previously taken part in the Invictus Games, they've all said that it's an honour, really. They feel that the whole nation is on their shoulders in a way, all this pressure.
Yeah, it's a pressure, it's a lot of stress.
But it is an honour, though. That's
absolutely.
the main thing. And they all say this.
It comes together. So they feel the responsibility and an honour to represent the country. And of course, I feel that each of them for the past 2 years made a huge effort, to move the veteran sport in Ukraine further.
And I know that Ukraine won 20 medals, is that right? The previous one?
Pretty much.
About that
yes,
number.
About that number.
Would you put any money on sort of how many medals you think Ukraine could possibly get this time? Or, are there more facilities to help veterans prepare for the Invictus Games in Ukraine? Yeah,
I think that I can safely say that we will have less medals this year because, this year we will not be focusing on medals at all. What we will be focusing on rehabilitation effect, and if we are successful, I would say that we would measure our success through the story that is changed for the veteran. If they see the positive, outcome for themselves in the future, if they can see their future positively, if they can, self-identify themselves, make themselves visible to community and see that they are valued, after Invictus Games, that is something that is going to be a success for us, not the medals. So we will be clearly communicating this year that no medals is okay. It's totally fine.
And on the Invictus Games Ukraine website as well, they always have the stories of the athletes.
Yes.
And I think this is great because it inspires others, even if they're not involved in sports from day to day. Really, it inspires people to get out there, just to try some new sport. Perhaps they've never even thought of doing some of the sports in the Invictus Games.
They are amazing role models, actually, for the other veterans, because, we have people, we have guys and girls who have unbelievable injuries and still they're doing well. They are healthy, they are, capable, they empower other people, they represent Ukraine on this international arena, and it's amazing. I think that this is something that inspires other veterans, and this is something that we want to show off, really.
And I think what the great thing is about Invictus in general is that it's much more than a sporting competition. It's much more than an event where the athletes and the wounded veterans turn up, they do the competition and they go back home. It doesn't work like this. So can you tell us a bit more about how it does work from your experience?
Well, actually, Invictus Games, not only about competitors, it's also about their friends and family and the community. So for Invictus Games, Team Ukraine back in Toronto and Sydney, it's just been, of course, the focal part of the entire event is their, sporting, performance. However, the friends and family, which they can take with them. Also, a huge part of the experience, and it's very important that the friends and family is there, because, really in rehabilitation of veteran, it's impossible to think about the successful rehabilitation of a veteran without engaging their families. So when we come to Sydney, there is so much work, not only about the sport events that, we need to organize, but also about these community events, about the friends and family events, about this, all the leisure,
And when you say community events, can you give an example of perhaps what a community event would be like?
In Canada, in Australia, there is a huge Ukrainian community, Ukrainian Australians, Ukrainian Canadians.
Oh, you've had a great backing.
Absolutely. They've been so much waiting for us. And, when the team comes, everything was, to their favor. Like, do you want to go to some kind of excursion? Yes. Do you want to go to the sea? Yes. Do we want to go to the museum? Yes. So they've been like taken care of like child, they were literally, it was amazing, really. So, of course, we had some bigger events, community events, like charity events, when, for example, in Canada, Ukrainian community made a huge charity event, and Justin Trudeau came, and the president of Ukraine, then president of Ukraine, Petro Poroshenko, came to this event. It was huge, but it was a charity event, and the funds which were collected during this event were actually brought back to Ukraine, and through that capital, a lot of Ukrainian veteran businesses benefited. So I think it's important that, Invictus Games goes further beyond competitors, beyond friends and family, but touches the lives of the wider veteran community back here. Yeah.
Well, we're definitely going to keep an eye on it. Thank you so much for coming into our studio, Oksana.
Thank you very much.
That was Oksana Horbach, head of Stratcom Ukraine. Thanks for watching. Stay tuned for more here on UATV.